Yes. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming out. My name is Brad Olsen. I'm the Executive Director of World Peace Through Technology organization, which I'll be explaining about this evening, and the co-producer of the Weird Street Faire, which is our main program, but not our only program. We do a few other things, which I'll also explain. But just want to say thank you all for coming out. I know you have many choices on your Wednesday evening and your full moon, so the fact that you're all here tonight is a great thing, because TV is very passive and you're just getting information one way. In this regard, we're all here live, and we'll have Q&A at the end, and we'll all get to know each other and become friends, which is a good thing in the world. So it's middle of January 2014, and the World Peace Through Technology organization was started just over 15 years ago. And I'll have to give you a little backstory because it does matter. And in 1995, I had just come back from a 3-year trip around the world that I self-financed myself, and that I met some really amazing people on the way. And as fate would have it, we all wanted to settle in San Francisco. And the group of Americans that I had met was all in India, which some say is the most spiritual of all countries. And we found ourselves all coming together in 1994, and we got this warehouse on Howard Street in San Francisco, which we called the CCC, and that stood for Consortium of Collective Consciousness. And Howard Street will play into this later, so keep that in mind. So basically, we had been going to these electronic music all-night parties in India, and it was quite the rage in the 1990s. It was just catching on, the whole DJ culture. And when we had gotten to San Francisco, it was really blossoming for the first time. And a lot of people have compared this time in San Francisco, the mid and late 90s, to the 60s in San Francisco, when such a blossoming of culture came about. You had your hippies, you had your electric Kool-Aid acid tests, you had your alternative lifestyle hippie generation, which, as we all know now in retrospect, went and changed the world. Now, I wouldn't go so far as to say that the DJ culture has gone and changed the world, but a lot of things came out of that time. And that is that you have DJs now, some of which, like Lauren, who goes by the name of Bass Nectar, he used to beg us to play in our CCC warehouse. Now he sells out small auditoriums. So this kind of music is becoming this cultural stronghold across the country. But I'll tell you, it started here in America. There were little outlets here and there, but in 1995, it was very much a very novel thing. And within the first month or two that we had established a lease on Howard Street, we met Michael O'Rourke, who you met earlier in the introduction. And he had this sister warehouse called Dimension 7. And oftentimes we had to do events at Dimension 7, and he would come to our parties at CCC, and then we'd do parties elsewhere, sometimes outdoors. And it was just this real blossoming of culture. Not just the music, but there were artists who were painting beautiful backdrops. And in our CCC warehouse, we had all these black lights on a very high ceiling. And it was just an otherworldly kind of environment. So to go to one of these parties was quite special. And we were never in it for the money. I think the most we ever asked to come in was $5, and it was always to just cover our expenses or help pay for party stuff. And So eventually, we had acquired not one, but two sound systems, one upstairs for like ambient down-tempo music, and another one was this psychedelic or Goa trance music. And these parties were just really great. People still talk about them. And the friendships that were made 20 years later are still as vibrant as they were back then. So I know that this was a very life-changing event for a lot of us who were involved, including some of the people in the audience, and we're all still very much good friends and work together on projects such as the Weird Street Faire. So we had this great warehouse. We were throwing these epic parties, but they were getting so popular that eventually we had to turn away most people who tried to come in. And it wasn't for a lack of wanting to let them in, it was just a space constraint situation. So at one point around the year 2000, we had to turn away 4 people for every one that we let in. And people were starting to accuse us of being elitist, and that's not cool, and who do you guys think you are, and you're better than us. And it wasn't about that. You know, in India, it was lose your ego and try to learn about things like activating your chakras and all these very exotic type of concepts that you don't hear about growing up in the West or learning about in our educational system. And so we're at this point where in 1999, we had this idea of starting a nonprofit organization. And that is when Michael and Justin and I, and Ed was on our original panel of directors, we all got together and we said, we want to try to bring peace into this equation in such a way that in late 1990s, you had the very first tech boom, which turned into a bubble, and as we all knew, the first tech bubble burst. But before it did, it was just this incredible outpouring of creativity, as I just described, and this certain kind of idealism that a lot of us thought was more than just a great party. Well, what is it? We said. And it seemed to us that it was this music which was generated electronically through a computer. And of course, there are a lot of critics that say, well, that's not like a band and you're not playing instruments and this and that. That's a debate for another day. But for us, it was, this is technology. And this does put a smile on people's face when they dance all night. And this is something tangible that we should try to articulate and to create a nonprofit organization. And as the stars were to align in that year 1999, one of these emerging tech geniuses, young millionaires, stepped into our picture, and his name was Joe Firmage. And there was a very famous San Francisco Chronicle headline that said, UFO tech startup feels that UFOs are going to change the world. And we said, well, we got to meet this guy. And I held on to that article for the longest time. And eventually we became friends with Joe Firmage. Michael especially even produced a movie for him called I Am, which is a classic. So we met this guy, and he was all idealistic and very enthusiastic, and we told him our concept of peace and technology and making this very clear distinction, which is our mission statement to this day, to inspire world peace through the benevolent uses of technology. Because we were at this point where clearly there was technology that could destroy the planet and kill the human race, and we're still confronting with that. And from a philosophical point of view, and Michael has a PhD in philosophy, and he can talk very in-depthly on this subject if we have time, that it is very important to make this distinction because there is technology that can also elevate us, not just in the sense of creating a great party, but now there's talk of transhumanism, of technology entering our lives and making us live well over 100 years old. Of course, you need the money to do that, and that's a whole other issue. But for us at the time, we felt it was very important to make this distinction, that there was technology that was good for humanity. And if we could start this nonprofit, if we could start to get the message out and do certain programs, that perhaps we could articulate this message that would resonate with a younger generation who was already coming to our parties and was leaving when the party was over with a great big smile on their face. And it's always been our position to say there's more to it than just a great party. I mean, it's one thing to have a wonderful time and meet new friends, maybe meet a new girlfriend or boyfriend, whatever. But if there's another step to be taken, that's what we are hoping to do. So Joe Firmage stepped into our lives in the year 2000 and gave us a sizable donation. So we had what we could articulate as a reason for starting this nonprofit group. And we now had the financing to take it to the next level. And so what happened was another person stepped into our life at exactly the right time. And he's sitting right here, and he's still a very good friend of ours, and that's Ed Taylor. And he volunteered to help us get our 501c3 status, which we still have to this day. And there are a lot of hoops you have to jump through and a lot of red tape. It's not nearly as easy as you might think it is. But it does afford us a luxury more than it would be if, say, we were an LLC, a limited liability corporation, or a partnership. It adds a modicum of protection for us, but it also keeps us in line with what our ideals are as far as how we can be true to this idea that there is such a thing as benevolent technology, and how are we going to go forward with it. Now again, if we have time and Ed wants to talk about it, he can tell you that most nonprofits that start will get their status, but unless they have a program, you're just going to kind of run out of steam. I mean, if there's nothing to do, there's nothing to do. So what we absolutely needed at that time in the year 2000 was a program, something that had teeth and traction and would carry on. And so I told you earlier about these parties at CCC, and we were having to turn away 4 people out of every one that tried to get in, and it really broke our hearts, and we weren't elitist in any way. And so the idea came, hey, we've got this warehouse, we've got the sound system, we've got the artists, we now have our 501c3 status, and we have the financing. Let's just roll our sound system right out there in front of Howard Street in San Francisco. We'll tweak the name a little bit, called the Weird Street Faire, and we'll give it a try. And the first year, in the year 2000, April 23rd, 2000, was our first Weird Street Faire, and it was just a block party. There were 2 stages with our 2 sound systems. There were some vendors in the middle, and probably 600-700 people came. It was a pretty small affair, but we were able to invite everybody in. We were able to say to the whole city, come on in. And I've heard stories from people that were just happened to be in the neighborhood that day, and what's that sound? And look at those people dancing, and let's go check it out. And they've been coming back year after year after year. So in a stroke of genius, I suppose, we just produced the party as best as we could. But it was more than a party, because that first Weird Street Faire, we had a speaker, and I was one of the speakers, but at the time, our videographer captured a friend of ours who gave a great speech. Let's see if I can cue this up. Here is the website for Weird Street Faire, and how do I get this to scroll down now? Okay, well, I should tell you a little bit about Weird Street Faire then.
You need to scroll down?
Yeah, I want to get to the past years, and I'll cue up a little video. Oh,
2 fingers.
2 fingers down. Duh. Previous years. Okay, so I'll show you a very quick video of year 1, which was a really epic year. And not that any of the previous years weren't, but this one had the ability to put us on the map. So, what am I doing wrong here, Sergio? Oh, there we go. It's called Year 2000, the UFO Arrives. And video clips.
Can you give us an idea of the age group?
Well, it was a younger age group, to be sure, because that's who our friends were at the time. But you'll see the speaker here is Michael Gosney, who at the time would have been in his late 40s, I think. And he, he had been coming to our CCC parties and was very much into this whole thing. And you also have to remember, this was the year 2000. And remember there was the Y2K scare, and there was like a lot of hope and anticipation, and before Y2K happened to nothing, I suppose there was some fear.
What, you want it bigger?
Yeah. Does it go bigger, Justin?
No. It's on YouTube, in the Bollyweird 2010 channel.
Oh, here we go. And how about volume?
We're the latest wave of creative culture here in San Francisco.
So here's Michael Gosney.
It's counter, or I don't know if it's really counter anymore exactly.
The light is
But the
dark.
beat culture, the psychedelic culture, the cyber culture, and this what's really rave culture, or maybe beyond. There's some new words, some new ways of looking at culture in the United States coming along. A study called The Cultural Creatives, that's a new demographic study, and it describes really this culture as trans-modern, combining both ancient and modern values. And as a kind of an expression of this new culture, we have this emerging techno-tribal shamanism, as it's being expressed in these beautiful events around the world. There's this rising international spirit here at the turn of the millennium, and we're expressing this spirit with this music and these events and these sacred arts and what are really religious rituals.
Reminds me of Burning Man. This is the very first?
Very first one, yeah. And as you can see, we have live musicians that were playing with the DJs, and the CCC warehouse would have been just right around the corner here.
So you're dancing in the street.
Yeah, right out in the street.
Easter Sunday.
On Easter Sunday, yeah. So this is a good little snapshot of our dancing in the street type of event.
Got everything?
And so we had a very successful first event. And while we had the CCC warehouse for the next year in 2001, which we always come up with a quirky theme idea, Sergio says it looks like Burning Man. It's very much like Burning Man. Some of the people who work on the inner sanctum of the Burning Man organization also work with us on How Weird. So there's these great parallels, but of course we're separate and we're different. And so we had this CCC warehouse going, and Burning Man was just coming into its larger stage in the late 90s. It had started out very small and humble in the early years. And we had gone to Burning Man every year as well. So we produced 2001 A Street Oddity, and it was kind of a parody of the Stanley Kubrick movie A Space Odyssey. And we even built a giant monolith, which we put in the middle of the street in 2001. But the other sub-theme in 2001 was the death of all the artist spaces, which is happening once again in San Francisco with the second tech boom. And Michael just leaving the Dimension 7 warehouse only 1 month ago is a perfect testament about how history is repeating once again. And when he did his farewell party just about a month ago, everybody was saying, you know what, we're losing another great space. And when you keep taking places like this out of the fabric of San Francisco, it's just going to start watering down the culture. To what point? We don't know. And that's exactly what happened in 2001, because we were at the tail end of the first tech boom. Our landlord wanted to triple our rent. Because it was a zoned commercial space, he was able to evict us. So the sub-theme of 2001 was the death of artist spaces, and all the artists in our CCC warehouse, we created these tombstones, which were right in front of the CCC warehouse, and each tombstone was another really great artist space, which was lost, including the CCC. And it would be unclear whether or not we would continue. And every year, we just thought, let's just do it. We'll do the very best we can, and let's see if we can pull this thing off. So I no longer lived there, but as fate would have it, I lived across the street, and at that time, Ed was my roommate. And so I was still in the footprint of where we did How Weird. And even though we had lost the CCC warehouse, we still had access to a lot of the equipment. But at that time, we started expanding our horizon. It was actually in the fourth year, called The Expanding Universe, that we went into the intersection of 12th and Howard. And at that time, we started adding stages, and we realized this is getting bigger than what we can produce. So we did what all the great corporations are doing right now. We outsourced, and we brought in other collectives, and they were able to produce their own stage with their own DJs and their own artwork, and we would give them a stipend. And this has been our policy that continues to this day with the How Weird. And I'll just talk about the How Weird all the way through, and then I'm going to come back to World Peace Through Technology, because that's our focus this evening. So basically, How Weird started to scale up in the same way that Burning Man did, probably by about 10 to 15% every year. And it was mostly word of mouth. Our marketing, which Justin does primarily, has been a word of mouth, very Spartan kind of marketing effort. Of course, we send press releases to the weeklies and the papers and other media outlets. Sometimes they pick it up, sometimes they don't. But the reputation that we had built on having such a great feeling and vibe allowed us to just scale up and scale up and scale up, to the point where in year 8, we were once again looking to expand into another intersection. And that was the year, in our largely residential footprint, the neighbors said, "You're getting too big, it's too loud." At that point, I had already moved to another location in the city, and they came to our ISCOT hearing through the city of San Francisco, and basically the city officials said, "You can't have this here anymore." And in year 8, we were actually shut down for a couple weeks until we mounted a very large grassroots effort and literally walked in with a stack of personal letters from people that says, "Don't lose How Weird. You know, we've lost enough artist warehouse spaces from the tech boom. We don't want to lose it." So what we did was we had to strike a balance with the city officials, and they said, "Okay, we'll let you do one more How Weird, the 8th annual, in this footprint, but after that, you can't come back." So I said, "Okay, you know, every year we're just going to try to do it, unsure whether or not we'll have the resources or the energy, the wherewithal to continue on." So we did it. It was a resounding success, as they all were. And then in year 9, our theme was Exodus. And we moved our footprint 10 blocks down Howard Street to our new location, where we're still currently at the intersection of Howard and 2nd Street. So we went from Howard and 12th to Howard and 2nd, 10 blocks away. And a lot of great changes have happened in that footprint since we moved in. It was a mixed use type of commercial environment, not that many residents, but if you go down there today, the tallest building on the west coast of San Francisco is soon going to go up, the Transbay Terminal. Yeah, and all these other new residential high-rises are popping up all over the place. And on one Sunday every year, we do our little street fair. And once again, we just scale up and scale up and scale up. Now we're at about 15,000 people that come to the How Weird. We had 13 stages, and we're maxed out of our current footprint. So this is the year, once again, we're challenging the system to allow us to expand, and we want to go into the intersection of 1st Street. And we're going to be presenting, Michael and I think Justin will come, and he's been doing some neighborhood outreach. We're going to present our case to the ISCOT panel, which is this interdisciplinary panel of city elders, from fire to police to DPT to Muni, and we're going to tell them our plan. And tentatively, they have said you can have partially the new intersection. They want to keep the traffic flowing through 1st Street intersection, but we're going to be able to get 1st Street to Mission. It's unclear, 8 days away before we get official approval on our 15th annual event, which is called How Weird in Outer Space, is our theme this year. So expect to see a lot of robots and aliens. And I should say, if you take a look at our website, which is howweird.org, I'm also an illustrator, graphic artist. I do the posters every year with another digital artist. And in every one of our posters, we have aliens, the little gray Schwab aliens, and UFOs. So in our way, our fun kind of way, we're putting it out there. We're just saying this is part of the culture. This is the fun zeitgeist of the ages that we live in. where we don't really know if we've been visited, but we kind of think we are. So we're just going to be artists and create things and make it part of our mythos. And that's kind of how Weird has reached these epic proportions. And today we find ourselves one of the leading street fairs in San Francisco. And this all just started out as a very grassroots organization by the principal directors here, which we're all very good friends. And we just do it because we love to do it and it's fun, but it also has this other meaning. And that other meaning is how we incorporate benevolent technology into our message. And this is when I want to go back to the year 2000, when we got our initial nonprofit status. And Ed walked us through it. It took us 5 years before the IRS would fully recognize our status. But with the money from Joe Firmage, we were able to finance the first couple of How Weirds and get that going. There were a lot of filing fees that we had to come up with. And at that time, we're starving artists. And unless we had gotten this startup money from Joe Firmage, it would have been very difficult for us to just pass a hat around and say, oh, we need $800 for this next IRS filing. So we were able to get through these hurdles. And when we found out that How Weird was a good recipe for a program that we could produce every year, we had our program. But there was more to it because we wanted to expand the concept of benevolent technology, and we also wanted to give back. So in our first footprint, which I call Old How Weird, and the old is spelled with an E, you know, the old English style. I still think that when I go in that neighborhood. As well as the name How Weird Street Faire with an E, kind of like Renaissance Fair. That there was this location for handicapped people called the Ark, which was in the How Weird footprint. And the few years that we had a profitable year, we gave them a check. And they were very grateful and very happy, and this was our way of giving back to the neighborhood. So this was one way that we felt that the success of How Weird could be given back to our community. And another one of our beneficiaries now in our new location is a youth group called the United Players. And I've been hiring them to help with the cleanup. So we give underprivileged youth an opportunity to work, if not for the day, but they're very grateful most times that they have that opportunity. Plus we sometimes will give them a check if we've done well that year. A lot of years have just been break even. We just cover our costs. Producing events is actually become a very expensive proposition. And as you were mentioning before we started this presentation, he said, how do you handle these rising costs? And believe me, they're expensive. And the things you don't see are these invisible expenses. The city makes us take out a $2 million insurance policy. It costs $3,000. This year we're going to have an ambulance on site. EMTs to the infrastructure, as well as what we promise the stages will pay them for their stipends. So all of us have worked under schedule. We're all underpaid, but we still do it because we love it. And it's quite a jolt to see this whole thing happen. From the morning of production, when we're out there and the barricades go up and the vendors show up and the stages come and everybody's kind of working like a hive of ants. And it's this kind of collective consciousness that I've always been fascinated with. In fact, the name of CCC, as I mentioned, was Consortium of Collective Consciousness. And so for me, it's like, how can we as the human race have something that the animals display that they already have? in a way that ants seem to have a sort of telepathy about them, or a flock of birds knows how to fly in the same way, or a school of fish. You see many examples in the animal kingdom. Well, what is it about humans, this top of the pecking order race, that's destroying the planet, that's doing all these terrible things? Why can't we have the same kind of collective consciousness to achieve really great things, such as a real and lasting peace on earth? And Justin put up a great, well, he did a survey about whether or not peace was achievable, and it's right there on the homepage of peacetour.org, and I want to explain that in 1 second. But the results are in, and we've got hundreds of people who have voted whether peace is possible or not, and it's 72% yes. And I'm sure I was one of those, and I hope you guys were too. Only 15 or 20 say no, not possible, and a few others were undecided. So it seems to me that there is that strength in belief that this is possible. But there is still something that seems to hold us back from really achieving it. Because as we know, since the year 2000, we've gotten involved in a couple more wars, and there's a lot of destruction of the environment that seems to be accelerating at a very alarming pace. And when I was backpacking around the world in the 90s, it was like the golden age of traveling the world, because for an American, we didn't have any enemies. You could even get into countries like Syria, and if you were really good at it and intrepid, you could probably work your way into Afghanistan or even Iran before they became our mortal enemies. Well, it's not the case anymore. So it's like we're in this regression of our standing here as these supposed world powers. So if in only our own subtle, personal group of 10 way with the How Weird Street Faire, if only we can produce this event that brings 15,000 people down, and we put a smile on all of their faces for one day, to me that's making a change. To me that's making a very subtle but promising attempt at bringing world peace to the people. So that is our outward program. Now we've done a couple other things, and I should explain the name Peace Tour, because back at our kitchen table at CCC in the year 1999-2000, when we were formulating the Articles of Incorporation for our nonprofit, we also had this vision, being travelers like ourselves. And I guess I should have told you in the setup piece that I'm also a writer, and I'm going to publish my 9th book next month, and Doris here is my lead editor of my new series of books called the Esoteric Series, which I hope to present to Friendly Favors in April as the launch party even. So that will be a great event. I hope you guys all come out. But as a travel writer and a very avid traveler myself, to be able to see the world and really experience the inequities that most people of the world have to endure, including seeing people dying on the streets, including people starving, including seeing animals horribly mistreated, there was a part of me that says, I have to do something about this. And even if it is in the context of doing a street fair and putting a smile on the face of 15,000 people, that's great. That's a start. But when we were envisioning what the programs were going to be for world peace through technology, and what our philosophical ideal was, the idea was, what if we were to take this out on the road? What if we were to make a peace tour? that could exhibit benevolent technologies. Those kind of technologies that could truly make a difference in people's lives. And Michael has been actually very instrumental in articulating this idea of a mobile educational gallery, which, if we can find the right sponsorship and make this work, we could show at the How Weird Street Fair, possibly even this year, of what a peace tour would be. And in the year 2000, they didn't have the GoPro cameras yet. They didn't have broadband internet. They didn't even have really good electric cars. And if I were to do a peace tour today, I would do all those things. I would not pollute in any way. I would try to do an event that brought communities together. Justin's passion for a long time has been Israel-Palestine. Maybe a little dangerous at the moment, but a great concept to think about. Maybe there's another way that we can bring people together in the same sort of way that we bring people together for the How Weird Street Fair, in this great plan and vision called the Peace Tour. Now, it's so big, and it would require so much funding and logistics that it's never really happened. I mean, we've taken the Peace Tour to Burning Man, we've taken it to Mount Shasta, we've done one-off events at other locations, so it's not fair to say that we haven't done it, but we haven't done it in the big, grand scale kind of way. And that could still very well be something that happens. So we got the name, and it's a great name, but it doesn't entirely encompass everything that we wanted it to be as far as inspiring benevolent technology, inspiring world peace through the benevolent uses of technology. And this is something that is very much a Silicon Valley kind of light bulb moment, shall I say, because here we are in this incredible region of innovation. Things that happen here in the Bay Area reverberate not only across the country, but around the world. And we know a lot of these tech entrepreneurs come to How Weird, just like the Google guys go to Burning Man every year. They're still young guys. They still need to have a good time. One challenge we've always had with How Weird is, how do we articulate the message of who we are as a nonprofit group to this greater audience? And it's been very difficult, because a lot of people that come to How Weird just want to come and have a great time. And you know, you can't beat them over the head with it. Of course, we put up our banners, we have information slips, we have stickers, we've had kiosks, we've had little gift shop booths. It just doesn't grab people in the way that we want to. But it's still okay, because they're still coming, they're still having a great time, they're still telling their friends, and in this age of Twitter, they're helping us with the marketing by telling all their friends to come on out here. You got to get down here. And we have a big surge of people showing up around 4 or 5 o'clock, and the event only goes till 8. So that is one success. But we've tried other programs, and we've tried elements of the Peace Pavilion or the Tech Pavilion. But now we have a new program that we're trying to do called Code for a Cause. And it's a link off the website, off of peacetour.org, you can see. And for a while, our organization was financing a group called Code for a Cause, was the group that we financed. And they were basically a bunch of tech pioneers who would come together in a room, and they would pick out a worthy cause, such as a homeless shelter, and they would build them a website. or they would build an app. And we would finance this, feel good about it, something good would come out of it. So now we started a program called Code for Peace. So we were trying to do the same kind of model, but the three of us have only so many hours in the day, and we all have regular jobs and ways that we have to make our own living. So it's not that easy. You know, ideals are great because ideals get us to the point where we can do things and motivate people and see these things happen. But this, again, like the Peace Tour, is quite a big project. And I think to really get it off the ground, we need help. Or to go back to the same kind of model of Code for a Cause. And if How Weird is successful this year, maybe we can throw some money at it and try to get some coders together. It's usually as easy as just renting a space, buying a bunch of pizzas, having a broadband connection, finding a good cause, and making it happen. So these are the kind of things we're working on, and from our humble beginnings of travelers and techno warehouses, we've now come to this point where we get a lot of hits on our website. People send us proposals all the time. Justin mainly does the links, and when people send us a good idea, if they do seem like they're developed, we'll put them up on our website. And so these kind of things have a way of becoming unintended consequences. And this is something I wrote about in my esoteric series, is that we put ourselves out there. And in the case of How Weird Street Faire, we have this intention of producing a safe and fun and healthy event for everybody that comes. Because let's face it, dancing is healthy. It's good for you. But there are unintended consequences in doing this event. And it is people coming up to me and saying, I came to How Weird, I met my girlfriend, we're having a baby. Now, did I think about that when we set about putting out the How Weird Street Faire? But I can tell you, children have been born because of the unintended consequences of putting on this event.
That's right.
So you put yourself out there, you do the best you can, and things just happen to blossom from it. And I think you know this quite well, Sergio, by doing friendly favors, that bringing people together and having dynamic speakers, it really brings out the best in people. And I really appreciate you giving me this opportunity to present the World Peace Through Technology in the How Weird Street Faire tonight. So thank you very much.
Two things. One is, before we open up to questions, can you think on ways that we can collaborate? And also, what do you need to enlarge your vision?
Right.
And also, I would like to extend the same questions. Can you think of ways that we can collaborate with the Peace Center? Because we have been appealing to the older generation.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we would like to have all the ages.
Okay, that's a great question. And he said, how can we collaborate and how can we bring it together into something like the Peace Center here? Well, the way we can do that is through Code for Peace. I mean, if you guys can identify a worthy cause, perhaps, maybe your own website, maybe an app for a worthy cause, I think we may be able to round up some tech engineers, and maybe we can do a Code for Peace event here. So that's one way that we could collaborate. Another way is I would just invite you all to come out to How Weird Street Faire on May 4th. So you see what we're up to. So you see how this is something that has grown very large, And we're still the same group of people we were 15 years ago when this started. I've heard that the best number of directors is 7 or 8. If you go 9, 10, 11, 12, it gets too big. Like this would be too big for a board of directors. But half of this size is about what we have for How Weird. Think about that. 8 people produce an event for 15,000 people. That's really remarkable. That's like for every director, they're responsible for 2,000 people. It just goes to show that we can work together. And then there's the whole concept of a power of 10. Like when Doris and I work together on the edits. She and I are just one person and one person. But when we work together, it feels like we're compounding to the power of 10. And that also happens with How Weird. And it's proof that 8 people can produce an event for 15,000 people. So this is an example of collaboration that has been successful. And I think it's because we genuinely like each other. We've all hung out today and had a great time seeing Michael's new warehouse space in Vallejo and exploring around and checking out Mare Island and being playful and fun and camaraderie. It goes a long way. And Ed is very generous. His family has a home up in the Redwoods, and we try to get all our directors to come to his house in the Redwoods every summer. And it's like a team building experience with all of us directors. So it's just my belief that if we're all good friends, good things are going to come out of it. And if you really believe in your heart that it's the right thing to do, and for us it's never been about money or getting rich, although we do put a lot of time into this and we have to make something out of it because otherwise we can't do it until the end of money is a reality, which is a chapter in my future esoteric book and in this section called Utopia, where I do believe we could get rid of it. And just think if everybody was operating from their heart. And every day you go to work, well, you're an artist and you already know this. You love what you do. I love what I do. It doesn't seem like work. But money, who cares? I mean, it's just that we have to live in this world that society has built these parameters around us that says, you got to pay your bill or you're going to be a deadbeat, mister. So, okay, then you sell your artwork. But we can go beyond that. And I think that's where the real peacemakers can make a difference in this world. And being in Silicon Valley and articulating this message of benevolent technology, I just think through the website and through the street fair and our outreach programs that somehow this is getting through to people. You know, maybe one of these days Mark Zuckerberg's going to send us a check for $10 million and we'll hire all the engineers for Code for Peace and all the programs and really take the peace tour on the road in the big kind of way we've always envisioned it. But if it doesn't happen, then we just keep doing it. And we'll just keep doing it. And that's what you got to be as a peacemaker. You just got to keep doing it. And have your ideals and believe in what you believe. And I believe in nonviolence. And as I've learned, like the warriors of the light, this is how they're doing it. They will not go up against these armies and this military power. They're going to do it on an energetic level. And this is what we have to do. Because if we really want world peace on this planet, we have to be these warriors of peace who come together in a nonviolent way, and we're going to subvert the dominant paradigm through the back door, where they're not looking. And we're going to come in that way, and we're going to make the great change. Then I think we're going to see some macro changes happening on this planet. And it's going to be a very beautiful day, a new dawn, when we can be proud for our children to inherit this wonderful planet of ours. How about that?
You guys want to add to this?
Yeah, do you guys want to add anything about the org, our programs?
I think you did a good job. One thing we do is we invite nonprofits to come to the fair and set up a booth and do outreach there. I don't know if it's something you guys would be interested in, but it's something that any peace organization can do. One idea that I just had is we've gotten a lot of interest from people to have programming for children, music, dance music for children, to kind of widen the diversity in ages and people that are getting stuff out of the fair. So far, no one's ever asked us to do something for older crowds. Maybe we can look into that, trying to expand the music programming to attract a wider range of people. All of it good enough that anyone who's interested in one stage might be interested in any other stages, and so that maybe the people that are in their 20s would go to the stage that's the older people and find something of interest, and find common ground and enable some kind of connection with those people. And the same thing with the stage of children.
Why don't you mention National Dance Week too?
This year, the Howard Street Fair coincides with National Dance Week. It did last year for the first time, and so once again we'll be participating. We'll probably have a flash mob and possibly an entire stage that will be hosting different dance programs and different types of dance from around the world.
Yeah, I wanted to point out that along the vein of sending out our message exponentially, we have our website, which is kind of obvious, but what it's doing is it's constantly sending out our message 24/7, 365 days a year, and on that you find all kinds of content regarding world peace and how to create peace and the history of peace and people involved in peace. And it's a great resource, which, although it does not require a lot of investment of money, it really represents what our organization, or what the World Peace and Technology Organization is all about, and what it's doing, and what it plans to do. And so that's an example of how small things can make a big difference. And another example of the force of technology in the world is, as you've probably noticed, Arab Spring and all the changes that have happened there. I mean, that happened after we had created this organization, and it's just an example of what this organization could have perhaps done or been involved in if we, managed to achieve some of our goals that we originally set out. But we still have a lot of potential, and we've lived up to a lot of potential. So those are my thoughts.
Michael, you want to expand on the mobile educational gallery or anything else?
Well, I mean, in terms of technology, and technology is a really big word. I mean, what does it mean in terms of what our org is proposing to do? But one thing I will say is that we were talking in the year 2000 about third generation cellular and Wi-Fi. Before those were technologies that were in any way widely deployed to consumers. So we've been a little prescient, I think, in terms of understanding where the puck will be in a couple of years, so to speak. And some very interesting things going on presently that I think, that are not in some, research and development lab that'll come out in 10 years, but in fact are actually, going to, I think, appear in a big way and have an equal, if not greater effect than, say, just, Wi-Fi networking. One of those things is called iBeacon, and the idea, very generally here, is that anybody walking around with a smartphone, of which I think there's, 2 billion smartphones in the world, perhaps, would be capable of being not only a sender and receiver of messages, but that it can actually act as a transceiver. So it can send and transmit messages and act in what some sort of network topologies would be called a mesh network, where these powers of 10 actually come into play again. But Brad mentioned earlier the idea of biomimicry, and this is sort of the idea of, if you think of, there's a great analogy made to talk about the power of meditation in a group, which is that when geese fly in formation, they will fly X percentage faster together than they would if they flew alone. Now, applying that, how can technology be used to actually allow this kind of, cell phones may be thought of as sort of the artifice or just training wheels for telepathy. And, we're getting to that point slowly but surely. And some people say, okay, well, you won't need the cell phone because there'll be a chip implanted in you. And that may actually how things do evolve. Most likely they will go that way. But the point is the chip is not needed either, because if you look at DNA and RNA, the transceiver, the antennae, all that stuff is actually part of our human makeup already. It's just that in order to understand a big concept like that, oftentimes there's these baby steps that need to be taken on a conceptual level, and then on a conceptual level they kind of come out through the human experience manifested as microchips or whatever the actual quote-unquote technology is. So just as an example, now in the consumer electronics space, things like Fitbit and Nike Fuel Band and all these things that will monitor your blood pressure, your body temperature, your heart rate, et cetera, et cetera. The real trick is not so much having the devices in place that can do this monitoring, but taking the data, which can almost be thought of as like exhaust. So we're entering what's called the Internet of Things. So everything is an IP addressable device, and it's giving off data. Even something as simple as a coffee mug. The coffee mug could know that I've taken 18 sips out of the coffee mug. That's a data point that's actually going out into the universe, because everything, and I mean everything, is addressable and will have some kind of IP address. So not to digress too much into the tech particulars, but the point is that all this data, and if you think about the Wi-Fi data in a busy city street, there's probably an order of 300 different Wi-Fi signals if you walk down one block in San Francisco right now. And if you think about all the data that is actually flowing, just imagine if, just for a second, that was visualized. We are awash, and there's data all around us, and we're not really that well aware of it. Some are, some aren't. But the point is that we can do something with this data that's really interesting. And to bring it back to how weird, is that it only happens one day a year, but we do have 15,000 people on the street. If we could only get 5 to 10% of them to opt in to a prototypical experiment of what we do with people's data and how we can use that data to create good intention, that sort of makes people think of technology in a whole new way. And the point is that we own our data. The data is ours. What the big companies are doing, they're providing services to us in exchange for our data, but the data does not belong to them, even though they want to lock us in to their service and monetize our data. We have to figure out ways, and I think one of the things the World Peace Through Technology organization will do is educate people about data literacy in this case, and the fact of data ownership, and how to, I hate to use the word monetize, but to monetize it for benevolent means. So, longer term, 5 years from now, when we're talking about doing How Weird in 2019 for our 20th annual, what is the world going to look like? Well, all this data that I'm talking about is for sure going to be here, and it's going to be understood in ways that none of us can understand it right now. And that's really the challenge, I think, for people thinking kind of creatively about advancements in technology, is how do you use these things? You know, maybe you could call it an entertainment application, but I'd like to call it an edutainment application. And that's, you know, where it's fun and you're learning. And then what's interesting about How Weird, though, getting back to the whole dance thing, is dance is kinesthetics. So when you move your body, you're actually, you know, that is a language unto itself. And we get people to move their bodies in sometimes in unison. And that is a really magical thing. And that's like, you know, if we could get people at the West Gate and the East Gate in Jerusalem to somehow be monitored and opt in, and then be able to, you know, to be expressive with their bodies or with their data or both, then some really magical things can happen.
Yeah, if we can harmonize our dance, then perhaps we can harmonize our lives.
We joined, like I think 2 years ago, there's a, I think it's like maybe International Dance Day.
Yeah.
So we danced, did we dance in Boston or France? Somewhere we did. So we were trying to, yeah, it's like everybody dances around before we join.
So you might be dancing at midnight if you're in the right time zone.
Got it.
Depends where you are, so,
So it's a particular moment.
and definitely, yeah.
I mean, the one thing about technology that kind of relates to that is that you can be in different time zones. And this whole idea of people communicating, you know, I mean, her daughter can be out on Skype a half hour from now, somewhere, you know, 8,000 miles away, and we're sharing that experience in real time with her because she's carrying around a little hockey puck in her purse that basically gives her Wi-Fi regardless of where she is. I mean, that's a reality right now that's happening in, you know, the developing world. It's not some kind of, you know, sort of first world, you know, exclusionary status. So where are we going to be in even a couple years? You know, this is all happening. It's sort of as if the Earth is moving faster than we're walking on.
I would like to add what you mentioned about meditation. And as I was listening to you, every word was said here, it really spoke to my heart. I am currently the prayer group leader at my church at St. Isidore's, and I see the power of prayer. One meditation, one person intention, and then collectively taking in our group. And also somehow, I have always practiced my faith.
That's all right. We did.
And I trust whenever I study at the Bible.
Yeah. All right.
And I believe with all of my heart. I believe when they told me, you know, this book is holy, is sacred, God told us this. I truly believe like a little child. So for me, it's natural to believe in miracles. And through the years, people have told me, Elvi, when I pray for you, I have experienced what you believe in the miracle. But I also learned that sometimes we might be in agreement, we might be praying, but if the people is not connected with their heart, like with the intention and the focus that you're really expecting that miracle, and nothing will happen. And that's what it's called faith. You really, when you pray for somebody else that is not you, or somebody that is your family, you kind of come out of your own. And you go to a higher level of spirituality because you start caring about others, about the environment, about the animal, about God's creation. And then when people start understanding that we can really move the mountains with our faith, especially with our good intentions. I just learned less than a week ago that for the people from India, dancing, it began in the temples to worship God. So they see it as sacred thing. I didn't know. I actually entered to a place with my shoes, and they were very patient with me. And I kind of was violating their space when somebody came, very kind. I felt the love, didn't know me, it was the first time. And they told me, you know, you need to take off your shoes because that space where you are is holy to us. I said, forgive me. I took off my shoes. And then the person felt my genuine respect and start sharing, this music, it began at the temples to worship God, and God gave us that gift of music and dancing. I would like to add, maybe for the weird, maybe it needs to be added like openly prayer, regardless of their belief, because that's what the world is hungry for. They need to know God. Most of people are still looking and searching for hope and finding God in their life.
When the How Weird was a little bit smaller, we did have, at the end of, what was it, a year or two, or we had a Native American shaman, and everybody who was there at 8 o'clock when we finished the event held hands in a big circle, and we have pictures of it from buildings. It's wonderful. It would be hard to do that with 13 stages because each stage is doing, but we try to do something like that at each one of our stages, and I'm glad you reminded us of that. It is something important to remember and try to do. Voila!
Voilà, thank you so much.
Very good picture.
Okay.
Touching the flash.
You're touching the
There you
flash,
go.
yeah. One hand only.
1, 2, 3.